And this is a concept introduced originally by AJ Warner from Off-Chain Labs. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go to the Arbitrum forum and read more about it. We could consider Arbitrum DAO to be a digital sovereign nation or state, depending on your definition. Now, what makes it that is, first of all, citizenship. The concept of that is that Arbitrum DAO is composed of a diverse set of stakeholders, from token holders through builders and delegates to large entities such as, for example, Off-Chain Labs and Arbitrum Foundation. The concept of citizenship is also a concept of belonging, which I believe that in the Arbitrum DAO is particularly strong. The second part would be resources. So there are certain resources that the Arbitrum DAO fully and autonomously controls. So, for example, the treasury and protocol being the two main ones. Following David Easton's, who was a Canadian political scientist, his definition of a political system, what happens within one is that there is an authoritative allocation of value, which in the Arbitrum DAO certainly also happens. Lastly, we have economy. The Arbitrum stack allows for unprecedented creation of economic zones of opportunity. Since it inherits its security properties from Ethereum, the system can capture value and reinvest it into the platform or build business lines on top of it. And this is particularly interesting as that's something where the value, in contrast to L1s that do need to incentivize validators, for example, the value can be fully captured and reinvested back into the platform. Moving on to the second part of the topic of my presentation, what is resilience? And especially speaking in the context of decentralized decision-making, it has certain characteristics that I'll try to go through here. It's a long discussion to be had on each of them. I'll try to break them down. The first one would be the ability to withstand external influence. So to give an example here, let's say we have a large Web2 company that is trying to exert influence, whether by trying to capture the chain itself or by trying the decision-making process, which then in turn can capture the chain. There are several characteristics that the Arbitrum DAO exhibits that prevent this from happening. Number one, there is a staggered governance framework. So one where multiple stages of governance need to take place before a proposal is mostly socially considered to be valid. It all starts with a forum post. Most likely, the proposal is then discussed and presented by authors on a governance call. That then turns into an off-chain temperature check on Snapshot where token holders vote. And then lastly, an on-chain vote happens where, again, it's a purely on-chain framework. So the changes can be executed directly and without a middleman. Secondly, we have the social fabric of the DAO. So that is very important and something where community truly comes into play, which is what is considered to be valid is determined largely by the usual processes and guardrails that the DAO has put in place. So you have a set of established actors, ones that do treat their reputation very seriously and as such become part of the DAO in ways that you would not see in a Web2 org. Thirdly, we have the forkability, which is based on social consensus, something that is unique to decentralized tech in general. There is the ability to fork, which is essentially, if there ever was a chain capture, the community could fork the chain and basically have the users, the infra providers, and all the other ecosystem actors determine which of the chains is canonical. And lastly, we have a multitude of parties, meaning that there is a wide array of teams and folks, individuals who are invested into the Arbitrum DAO, both financially and emotionally, I would say, that do have the ability to prevent this type of external capture, and they have the ability to spot it quite quickly, I would say. Let me see if I can. There we go. The second ability is to function with no single point of failure. And that quality can be broken down into two aspects of it. The first one being a decentralization of actors. I've already mentioned the community, and I'm going to mention it throughout my presentation, but a robust community of stakeholders and decision makers ensures liveness. So imagine a scenario where a large entity, such as, for example, the Arbitrum Foundation, goes down from one day to another. There aren't many ecosystems who could withstand that, and I would say that Arbitrum is one of them. You have a multitude of different parties that could potentially take up the role if needed. Now, is it easy? No. Is it possible? Absolutely, I would say it is. And the second one is decentralization of control. So a highly decentralized set of economically aligned decision makers, i.e. the token holders, holds all of the cards. And I think this is the most fundamental thing about DAOs, is that you have the widest set of stakeholders holding all of the cards, granting legitimacy to decisions that are being made, which in the case of Arbitrum DAO is the token holder set. The third ability is to recover from failure. Now, while there isn't a single point of failure, failure is an inherent part of system design, and the ability to withstand that or recover from it is a critical one as well. Now, what does the Arbitrum DAO do? First of all, there are certain checks and balances, and this is especially important on the more social layer, where you could imagine a team, for example, going against a proposal that they were elected based on. Now, what happens in that scenario is that there are multiple dependencies between actors to ensure fallback mechanisms. In this case, it would most likely be a committee that, for example, either takes actions themselves or reports back directly to the DAO, which then takes action based on whatever the recommendation is. Second part, and this is very relevant for the more technical aspects, especially the on-chain security, contract security, we have the Security Council, which is a very unique body in that it is regularly elected by the DAO and serves as the last line of defense against security threats. It does have the authority to enact on-chain change. And funnily enough, we just started the election process for September cohort. So if you are interested in participating in the DAO and probably one of the more important roles out there, feel free to go to the forum, check it out, and apply also directly in the forum. The election will take place also relatively soon. Lastly, we have the ability to evolve, and this one is somewhat less defined in nature, but it is also very important as it concerns resilience of DAOs and resilience of decentralized systems in general. I believe we are in an industry where you can log off for 6 months and basically come back to an environment that is drastically different, where the tech that you thought was bleeding edge is no longer viable because something twice better came along. What this means for infrastructure and also the DAOs that do govern that infrastructure is that there is a need to constantly evolve, to constantly improve, to find ways on how the utilization of resources can be made better. In the context of Arbitrum DAO, I think a good example of how that can be exemplified, it's the new vision, right? The new vision for the future of Arbitrum that was posted several months ago by the Arbitrum Foundation and the Arbitrum Forum. If you haven't seen that and are at all interested in the Arbitrum DAO or the Arbitrum ecosystem, I would encourage you to do so. There are several main propositions within that vision, and I'll go through them one by one. Firstly, we have an operational shift that is being put forward. The concept of Arbitrum-aligned entities is introduced in order to reinforce operational efficiency. Arbitrum-aligned entities are teams and orgs that are purely focused on Arbitrum winning. They are fully Arbitrum aligned, and in fact, they do not exist without Arbitrum, such as, for example, the Arbitrum Foundation, where we would have no job if Arbitrum, the protocol, was not around. The operational efficiency comes from the fact that you now have experienced teams that are leading executions of initiatives. In fact, they do have mandates to perform, and within those mandates, they can onboard service providers to help with particular initiatives, which is somewhat of a difference to the model that was around until now, since DAO's launch, where service providers would essentially come directly to the DAO with their proposals, and those proposals would then be executed by them. They would need to also report back to the DAO, which, as you can imagine, is quite difficult to have true accountability towards a set of thousands active token holders. So the idea here is to introduce the concept of a proper counterparty for those service providers. Secondly, we have the aspect of stakeholder role recalibration. So various roles in the ecosystem are redefined. And a good example here are the delegates, who we see as naturally shifting towards a more strategic mindset rather than highly operational. So in the absence of proper counterparties, the delegates would serve as those in the past, meaning that you would have service providers who would work directly with them, and so they were involved in those day-to-day operations, which made their role quite wide, I would argue. And it also somewhat took away from more of that strategic thinking mindset, which I think could be exemplified very well by the SOS framework. So it's the strategic objective setting framework that the DAO has been conducting in the last couple of months, which saw many different proposals on how the strategy of the Arbitrum DAO and the Arbitrum ecosystem should evolve. And I view that personally as a really great example of what delegates could be doing and probably should be doing, are those strategic discussions on where Arbitrum is headed instead of focusing on the more mundane operational tasks at hand. Thirdly, we have the operations company and the oversight and transparency committee. So the operations company was introduced firstly as an operational mesh layer for the DAO. And in the new vision, its mandate is proposed to be expanded towards becoming a bridge or a connective tissue between the Arbitrum-aligned entities and the DAO itself. The OAT, on the other hand, is the oversight committee, which, as the name implies, serves to oversee the operations of the OPCO and report back to the DAO. Lastly, we have an improved proposal process. This is also important to know that a lot of those changes, if not most, they refer to the social consensus layer, meaning they tend to interact more with the best practices that the DAO has put in place and improving them, rather than the actual on-chain framework, for example. So the proposals are to be primarily funneled through AEs with adequate mandates, which would then be facilitated by the OPCO. So as I mentioned before, each AE should have a mandate that they act within, and within that mandate, they can also take on service providers, and service providers coming to the DAO would now come to AEs to see if there is potential for collaboration with the OPCO, serving as a facilitator of those relationships. Now, that's pretty much it from my end. I want to thank you all for coming. It's really a full house here, which I really appreciate. I also want to add from my end that if you're a builder, a user, an ARB token holder, or anything else that can be imagined, the Arbitrum DAO is probably the place for you. It's a really unique place to work in. It's a unique place to build up your skills. And it's really something that I would consider an honor to be a part of. And it's, I truly believe that whoever you are and whatever you're doing, there is a place for you in the Arbitrum DAO. That's it from my end. I would open it up to questions. I don't know if I can pass on the mic, or maybe you can ask.
Can you show from the interface perspective some of your actions in this DAO environment?
Yeah. So to give you an example of what I was mentioning in the previously in the presentation, let me quickly close this one. we go. The off-chain signaling, for example, would take place on snapshots, where you see, I have to say, there's almost always a proposal live in the Arbitrum DAO, which again goes back to the very active nature of it. It's not a dead org. There's always something going on, especially as you compare it to other DAOs in the space. So you can see, for example, here was a technical proposal that combined three different. Oh no, that's the dip. Sorry. Yeah, that's also a good example. That's the delegate incentive program. So this proposal put forward several improvements to the previously accepted version, and so the discussion happened first in the forum, which is your regular discourse forum implementation. Calls happened, and then the snapshot temperature check was taken. After which proposals do evolve into an on-chain proposal, right? So you can see, for example, the bundle that I was mentioning. It's a technical proposal that has three subcomponents, which are listed here, as well as in the proposal text and payload. Obviously, this is Tally, which is our service provider for the on-chain voting flow. What you would do is connect your wallet. It would detect your voting power, which you could then use to vote in this proposal. You can see that the quorum for this proposal to be valid was reached. The majority support is overwhelming, which also comes down to the fact that this is purely a technical proposal interacting with the on-chain contract framework. There is no disbursement.
Any kind of role in foundation or in this forum or some other entity related to Arbitrum, you still can apply for the Arbitrum grants and so on?
Well, that's also a difficult question, right? Yeah.
Or certain roles, there are some strict rules, no because
Yeah, in some cases it's purely based on conflict of interest policies. I can't really give you one answer here. It will depend on what your role is.
Okay.
Please, you can go ahead and
Hey, Adam here. I have a question. What were the recent successes and challenges of Arbitrum DAO, its ecosystem, and also how does it relate to the Orbit ecosystems? Are they one or related?
Mm-hmm. So Arbitrum One and Arbitrum Orbit, I would consider them as part of the same stack, but they are separate, right? If we are talking about recent successes, I would probably point to the drip launch, which is called the DeFi Renaissance Incentive Program, and I'm trying to pull up the tweet, but I can't really find it. But that happened like yesterday. So feel free to go to Twitter and just type in drip, and you will see some interesting updates on that. That's the question.
Yeah. So with the new vision, in what ways do you see it becoming more decentralized, or how is decentralization iterating with the new vision compared to like the classic Arbitrum? Because there is kind of like this, cloud around the efficiency and structure of Arbitrum DAO and with like their ability to remain decentralized and efficient, right? So, and I'm curious, like, as head of governance with your new vision, how is that iterating?
That's a fair question. I would essentially try to distinguish between efficiency and decentralization. And the reason why I say that is that at the fundamental layer, DAO is the token holders, right? You have Arbitrum token holders, which are, an extremely diverse and distributed set. They oftentimes do not communicate with each other. It's an environment where you can come in just to tally, to vote on proposals and do nothing else. And so that is where the legitimization of any actions further down the line comes from, right? You have a token holder set voting on proposals that are then translated into operations, right? You have the day-to-day operations, which simply cannot be handled by such a diverse group. You have that role delegated to someone. So the question is only who do you delegate it to? Who is the most efficient and who should be taking up this mandate to execute, right? Which this new vision is essentially shifting that towards the AEs who are now tasked with that execution. So it does not impact decentralization. It only changes how operations functions at the later stage.
But like Arbitrum as like a thought experiment at the frontier of like Web3, innovation. Having an operational company and then having an oversight committee, it is more of like structure of a classic corporation. So I think like decentralization here is more just about like the resilience rather than perhaps like the difference between distributive versus decentralized. So I guess it's operationally more resilient, right? If you have more service providers and an oversight committee, but I think like the thesis here is kind of that the social element kind of it can have collusion, right? Given that everyone knows everyone and it's not so decentralized in that way.
I would respectfully disagree. The entrance to the system is fundamentally open, right? You can buy tokens and you can participate in the governance framework. Now, what makes it decentralized is that at any point in time, any token holder who has the required amount of tokens can go forward and put an on-chain proposal up for a vote, right? You do not need permission from anyone to do that. That's another question, right? But you have that ability, and so the token holders have, at the end of the day, full control over what happens further down the line. They can, remove committees, add them. They can completely restructure the DAO. They can also, implement any change on the protocol level that they wish so, or do any type of disbursement from the treasury that they choose to do. That's what decentralization fundamentally means in the context of Arbitrum DAO.
So to me, that sounds more of like permissionless rather than decentralized, but I guess it's about definitions probably.
It depends on how you define it, as you say. But fundamentally, I believe like this is what makes it decentralized.
Okay, great.
Well then, if there are no other questions, then I thank you all for showing up. Sorry, maybe you just want to have a quick one. Yeah, please do. So we're already at time, so.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick one. Just curious to get your thoughts on it because of course there's the average upholder and there are all exchanges of course which have different expertise, not involved in the governance perspective. I would assume has any thought been given how like the average upholder versus an orbit chain would be treated in governance sense from involvement? I guess if it's token based, of course it's only how much token you're holding involved in it, but just from involvement in discussions, on technical discussions and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and it also raises some other sub points. So I won't go too long on that, but I think that there is a huge variety of stakeholders that are currently untargeted by the Arbitrum DAO in its participation. I would point to also apps that function on the chain that are an important component. Like they are the ones who bring in the users. So their opinions should matter, right? Unfortunately, they tend to stay on the back line or the sideline because DAOs are complicated. They are complex systems, and especially if you add this day-to-day operations, requirement to whatever role they might be playing, it quickly gets overwhelmed. Like you need someone full time to track what's going on in the Arbitrum DAO, which is also one of the positive consequences coming from the new vision that now with a more strategic focus of those participants, you can have them enter more easily. Like the barrier for entry is no longer super high because you need to read like 1,000 posts before you have any context of what's happened, right? So that's what I would say in terms of just other, in general, actors participating is that they're definitely invited and we're trying to make it easier, right? The Arbitrum DAO is actively trying to make it easier. Okay, well then, thank you all. I wish you all a